once again. I'm very happy to be back for such a noble cause, and it's my pleasure to present my offering today. Um, as we have already done in the last few sessions, I've paid my humble tribute to Hari and Hara and to Devi. Today we're going to explore something that is a confluence of two of these elements, and I'll explain more after the opening invocation. Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha, Gurave Namaha, Guruve Namaha, Guruve Namaha, Guruve Namaha. மார்கழி திங்கள் மதி நிறைந்த நன்னாளால், மார்கழி திங்கள் மதி நிறைந்த நன்னாளால், நீராட போதுவீர் போதுமினோ நேரிழையீர். மார்கழி திங்கள் மதி நிறைந்த நன்னாளால், நீராட போதுவீர் போதுமினோ நேரிழையீர். சீர்மல்குமாய் பாடி செல்வச் சிறுமீர்கள், சீர்மல்குமாய் பாடி செல்வச் சிறுமீர்கள், கூர்வேல் கொடுந்தொழிலன் நந்த கோபன் குமரன், கூர்வேல் கொடுந்தொழிலன் நந்த கோபன் குமரன். நேராந்த கண்ணி யசோத இளஞ்சிங்கம், ஏறாந்த கண்ணி யசோத இளஞ்சிங்கம், கார்மேனி செங்கண் கதிர்மதியம் போல் முகத்தான், கார்மேனி செங்கண் கதிர்மதியம் போல் முகத்தான். நாராயணனே நமக்கே பறை தருவான், தருவான் பறை தருவான். நாராயணனே நாராயணனே நமக்கே பறை தருவான், நாராயணனே நமக்கே பறை தருவான். பாரோர் புகழ படிந்தெலோரெம்பாவாய், பாரோர் புகழ படிந்தெலோர் எம்பாவாய், படிந்தேலோர் எம்பாவாய். Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Thanks to one and all who have given me this opportunity, and for everyone who's joined us today. So today's presentation we began with the very iconic first verse of Andal Nachiyar's Tirupavai. Being in the month of Margazhi, the magnum opus Tirupavai of Andal is very famous and very popular for this month, and I think it's very apt to start today with the very first verse of the Tirupavai. Here Andal Nachiyar tells us a preface of so the entirety of the Tirupavai work, which we'll be looking into a little more in detail today, deals with Andal Nachiyar, who was one of the 12 Vaishnavite saints called the Alvars. Andal Nachiyar in this Tirupavai tells us a very special fast or a ritual that she performs for the duration of this month of Margazhi over the 30 days, and she gives us a preface of all the things that happen in this first pasuram. And she begins by saying, Margazhi Tingal Madi Nirainda Nannalal. Margazhi is the name of the month that we are now in. Margazhi Tingal, the month of Margazhi, Madi Nirainda Nannalal. There are a few different versions to interpret this line, but the most standout meaning is that in this auspicious month of Margazhi, we go on this journey, the spiritual journey of pursuing this vratam to attain Lord Krishna, is what Andal says here. She begins with the word Margazhi Tingal, denoting this month. And Today we are going to, through the lens of this month of Margari, explore an age-old debate that actually need not be a debate, but we have misinterpreted it to be. But today we're going to explore this concept of the union of Mahavishnu and Mahadeva, or Shiva and Vishnu. For ages, seers and many saints of these two different faiths have asserted time and again that though we might subscribe and we might be more loving towards one deity, the other is just another manifestation. Even if we are a Shiva Bhakta, Vishnu is no different from Shiva in principle. So there is no need for a rivalry. It is just what you subscribe to. But nonetheless, there have been many in the past who have created these distinctions and contests. But today we're going to explore the reality of Hari-Hara Abhedham, or the oneness, union of Hari and Hara, through the works of various saint composers, seers, and especially through the lens of how they come together in this auspicious month of Margari. So, coming to Margari, why is Margari so special? There are many Vishnu-related festivals that fall in Margari, like the Vaikuntha Ekadashi, the Gita Jayanti, related to the Bhagavad Gita, and when it comes to Shaivism, there are enough festivals related to Mahadeva as well. Nanjundi Ekadashi falls in this month, which is believed to be the day that Lord Shiva consumed the deadly venom that came out of the Milky Ocean during its churning. The very auspicious day of Arudra Darshanam just happened, I think, less than 2 weeks back. So there are many festivals that are celebrated in the month of Margari for Vaishnavism as well as Shaivites. And apart from the ones I mentioned, there's also the Kala Bhairava Jayanti. There is the Dattatreya Jayanti, Dattatreya being the amalgamation of Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva. And there is Hanumat Jayanti, and there are so many more festivals that show the union of these two deities. So what is the glory of this month of Margari? There is an entire chapter called the Margashirsha Mahatmya that appears in the Skanda Puranam that deals with how special Margari is. We'll come again to that in a second. But the most fundamental idea is that for us creatures on Bhuloka, the day is essentially divided into 12 muhurtas as per the Vedic system, each consisting of roughly 2 hours. And among these 12 muhurtas, the muhurta that comes right before daybreak is called the Brahma Muhurta. So roughly it will fall right before sunrise, maybe around 4 to 6 am. And this period is called the Brahma Muhurta. And Muhurta means that period, and Brahma literally means God. So the godly period is called the Brahma Muhurta. And this is known to be the period that is ideally suited to pursuing any rituals or activities that take you ahead in the spiritual journey. And it's a time of stillness and focus for us to embark on this spiritual path. When it comes to the celestials, or those who live beyond, those who exist beyond the plane of Bhuloka, their time is calculated slightly different from what we have on Bhuloka. So if 24 hours forms one day for us, their one day is equal to 1 year on Bhuloka, which means that 12 months of the year will become 1 muhurta each for the devas. So as per this calculation, each muhurta of the devas is equal to 1 month on Bhuloka, and the Brahma muhurta of the devas happens to coincide with the Margari month that we celebrate on Bhuloka. This is one of the glories of Margari, and we say that Margari is so auspicious because it is the Brahma muhurta of the celestials, and it becomes the ripe opportunity for us to grab and worship the celestials and gods and continue the spiritual journey of ours. Coming to the word itself, Margari is a Tamil derivation of the Sanskrit word Margashirsha. Margashirsha is essentially a combination of the words Marga and Shirsha. Marga means path and Shirsha means head. So the chief or the foremost path, the heading path of spirituality, this month is the month that is most ideal for us to pursue this foremost path of the divine. Hence it is called Marga Shirsha Masam. And this has been talked about extensively in different Puranas and by different composers. For example, on a very similar vein, Tyagaraja Swami in the very popular composition says, Chakani Raja Margamundaga Sandula Duranela Manasa Chakkani Rajamargamulundaga Sandula Duranele O Manasa Shri Saketa Ramuni Bhaktiyane Chakkani Rajamargamu. So the same Marga Shirsha has been slightly differently worded as Raja Margamu here. And Tyagaraja Swami says, when you have the chief foremost path of Rama Bhakti to aid you, why is it necessary to indulge in any other path? When you have Rama Bhakti to guide you, that is the Marga Shirsha. And this month of Margari is the ideal time to pursue that Marga. So why does this particular aspect of Rama Bhakti become so much more special to us is the question I hope to address for the rest of today's presentation. And to address that question, we have to come to the concept of the coming together of Shiva and Vishnu. And hopefully you will have a better understanding of what Rama has to do with Shiva and Vishnu at the end of today's presentation. So when it comes to Shiva and Vishnu, there are numerous forms of these two lords that we celebrate, so many different temples, so many different manifestations of these deities. But instead of going into all of them, today I wish to focus on the two Rajas who are like the kings who rule from the capitals of the respective faiths. So when we come to Vaishnavism, the capital of Vaishnavites, if they just say Kovil or temple without mentioning which temple, it automatically defaults to Srirangam, which is where Rangaraja or Ranganatha rules. Parallelly, in Shaivism, if someone says Kovil or temple without mentioning which one, it naturally points to Chidambaram, where Nataraja rules. So, these two Rajas, Nataraja and Rangaraja, are the kings of these two different faiths, ruling from the capitals Srirangam and Chidambaram. Another beautiful similarity between these two are the manifestations of Shiva and Vishnu that we'll mainly be focusing on today. Another beautiful similarity in their iconography is that while most temples have the central deity, generally east facing or something like that based on the Agama Shastra, both these Rajas, Nataraja and Rangaraja, happen to be facing southwards in their respective abodes. The symbolism of this is that Yamaraja or Yamadharmaraja, the Lord of Death, is known to preside over the southern direction. So the fact that both these Rajas face towards the south symbolizes that they face the fear of death for us and erase that fear from our minds by showing us the path to attain the ultimate refuge which lies beyond this end of life which we call death, which is the refuge of their lotus feet. By showing us the supreme bliss of mukti which is available to us beyond this worldly life and illuminating the path to attain mukti, the path of liberation, they eradicate our fear of death, which is nothing but an exit from Bhuloka. And how they do this, how Rangaraja and Nataraja show us the path to salvation, is beautifully highlighted in the festivals that are celebrated during Margari for each of them. So first we look into the unity between these festivals of Rangaraja and Nataraja before we proceed further. So when we come to Vaishnavism, as I mentioned at the very beginning, perhaps the most celebrated festival is that of Vaikuntha Ekadashi. And Vaikuntha Ekadashi is probably celebrated nowhere more grandly than in Srirangam. In Srirangam, the processional form of the deity, the Archatirumeni, is taken on a very specific path. It is taken from its usual abode, and the Lord follows a particular path, and he comes out and enacts a series of activities before he finally reaches the sanctum sanctorum of the reclining Ranganatha, and which is where he rests. So without going into the details of this path that he takes, we'll just think about what the symbolism of it is. It means that when the Jivatma, or the soul that resides in this human body or in any creature on Bhuloka, ends its time on earth and finishes its lifetime for now, it exits this body and goes up to the plane of Prakriti, and if it has qualified itself by through its karmas and by finishing off all its actions or by doing Sharanagati to the Lord, then that Jiva finds its way beyond the plane of Prakriti and ascends to Vaikuntha, where it is welcomed, where it crosses the Viraja Nadi, is welcomed by the celestials and ultimately attains oneness with Vaikunthanatha or Srinivasa. If it hasn't finished all its Papa Punya and it has more to experience, then from the plane of Prakriti it comes back and reincarnates or is reborn on earth. So this path of Bhuloka to the plane of Prakriti, to Vaikuntha, and finally attaining the oneness with Narayana is what the processional deity that is taken out on its procession during Vaikuntha Ekadasi shows us. So the Lord himself enacts to us the path to reach him during this festival, so that someday when we also have that opportunity, we can find our way to that ultimate refuge of Ranganatha. So this is how Mahavishnu shows us the path to salvation during Margari. On a parallel note, a very similar thing happens in Chidambaram on the occasion of Arudra Darshanam. Again, Arudra Darshanam is most grandly celebrated perhaps in Chidambaram of all temples. On this day of Arudra Darshanam, the cosmic dance of the Lord is celebrated. The Kunchita Padam, the lifted left foot, is the most celebrated feature perhaps of the dancing Lord Nataraja. And this Nataraja's dancing form is extolled by many composers as the ultimate pathway to salvation. It is said that if you just meditate and cling to this lifted left foot, Nataraja is showing you the way, that just hold on to my foot and I will take you to liberation. Which is why it's said in a popular shloka that quotes the different ways to attain mukti, it is said, Darshanad Abhrasadasi, Chidambarattai Kandal Mukti, which means, while there are many paths to attain salvation, just a true darshanam of Chidambaram, which means not just looking at the Lord, but truly realizing the meaning of that cosmic dance, is all that you need to attain mukti. Which is why one of the 3000 Dikshitars who are very special to this temple of Chidambaram, they're called the Tillai Muvayirattavar or Trisahasra Munishwaram, says Dikshitar on his composition in Chidambaram. One of the Dikshitars, called Swarnam Venkatesha Dikshitar, tells us in a beautiful composition about this dance. We'll just hear a few lines from that before I explain a little bit more about it. கண்டவர்க்கு கனவிலும் காலபயம் ஏதையா, கண்டவர்க்கு கனவிலும் காலபயம் ஏதையா, கண்டவர்க்கு கனவிலும் காலபயம் ஏது, மெய்யாய் கண்டவர்க்கு கனவிலும் காலபயம் ஏது, மெய்யாய் கண்டவர்க்கு கனவிலும் காலபயம் ஏதையா, கனக சபை தன்னில் இடது காலை தூக்கியாடும் காட்சி கண்டவர்க்கு கனவிலும், தொண்டருக்கு தொண்டனாகி தூது நடந்த பாதம், தொண்டருக்கு தொண்டனாகி தூது நடந்த பாதம், தூமரையோர் உள்ளம் தினம் துதிக்கும் குஞ்சித பாதம், கண்டவர்க்கு கனவிலும் காலபயம் ஏதையா. An excerpt from the composition where the composer says, Toomarayur ullam dinam tudikum kunchita padam kandavarku kanavilum kalabhayam yedaya. For anyone who has witnessed the kunchita padam, the lifted left foot, the fear of death is not even there in the slightest in their minds, even in their dreams. Which means to say that truly realizing the meaning of Nataraja's cosmic dance, Nataraja's dance is even called the Panchakritya Natanam, wherein each of his right hand holding the Dhamaru symbolizes creation, the left with the Agni symbolizes destruction, Tirodhanam, Anugraham and Sthiti are also visualized in his dance. And if you can just, the Anugraham aspect is symbolized by his Kunchita Padam, some say. So just realizing that true meaning of that Kunchita Padam, that cosmic dance, will show us the path to liberation. So this is how Nataraja shows us the meaning of his cosmic dance, hoping that someday we will also realize its true potential and finally find our way back to him. And a quick, it's very interesting to note that it's not just within our country that Chidambaram Nataraja has hailed so much, but even in CERN in Switzerland, which is the Center for Research of Subatomic Particles, there is a huge idol of Nataraja right outside the research laboratory. And when inquired what the significance of having it there is, they revealed that it was, the Nataraja Murti was a gift from India to CERN, and it has been put on display because, in their words, it is a metaphor drawn between the cosmic dance of the Nataraj and the modern study of the cosmic dance of the subatomic particles, which is what they research there. So it's a very beautiful symbolism that Nataraja shows us, and his Kunchita Padam and the realization of his cosmic dance is what leads us to Mukti. So we see how Rangaraja and Nataraja show us the path to Mukti during Margari on their respective festival days. And in Margari, this day of Ardra Darshanam is celebrated on the full moon night during the early pre-dawn hours of this day of the full moon. And the beauty is that here again we see a link between Shaivism and Vaishnavism, because like I said, full moon night of Margari is when the Ardra Darshanam is celebrated. And in the Tiruppavai, which is a Vaishnavite text written by Andal Nachiyar, the very first line she says, Margari Tingal Madi Nirainda Nannalal. Madi can also mean moon, and Madi Nirainda Nannal means the auspicious day of the full moon in the month of Margari. So it's very, one could say coincidence, but I think it's a divine sankalpam that the first line of the Tiruppavai mentions the day that happens to be Arudra Darshanam. And coming to the Tiruppavai, we'll now look into a parallelism of the two texts that are celebrated in each of these faiths as most important during the month of Margari. So the very popular Tiruppavai in the practice of Vaishnavism is celebrated during the month of Margari, and we look at a slight backstory to understand the significance of the Tiruppavai. The very first mention or rather the most iconic mention of Margari appears in the Bhagavad Gita in the 10th chapter called the Vibhuti Yoga, where when Bhagavan Shri Krishna lists out the things that he is seen in most clearly among various flowers, trees, etc., he says, Masanam Margashirshoham, which means among the months I am Margari. So later, Brahmadeva goes to Narayana after the Krishnavataram and inquires, what is the meaning of this line? Why did you say so? What is the significance of the month of Margari? And this leads to a whole chapter called the Margashirsha Mahatmya that appears in the Skanda Puranam. I'll just sing one or two lines from the chapter to these are directly the words of Mahavishnu said to Brahma that have been recorded in this Puranam. So I'll sing those lines, a few of them, and I'll then explain them as well. Yajñadhyayana danadhyaihi Yajna Adhyayana Danadhihi Sarvatirthartha Vagahanaihi Sanyasena cha Yogyena na Sanyasena cha Yogyena Naham Vashyo Abhavam Nripanam Naham Vashyo Abhavam Nrinam In this verse, Mahavishnu tells us many people practice rituals, studying scriptures, charity, taking holy dips in holy rivers, etc., because they think this is the path to attain me. But almost no one can win me over by these practices, says Lord Mahavishnu. Which means, it doesn't mean that these things are not worth practicing. He means to say that these are more difficult paths to attain him, which are almost impossible to completely fulfill for the residents of Bhuloka, which is us, the lowly mortals. But if there is a simpler way that is easiest to attain him, he tells us that as well. He says, Snanena danena cha pujanena dhyanena maunena japadhibhischa Vashyo yatha margashire Vashyo yatha margashire Margashire chamase Margashire chamasi Tatha na cha anyeshu cha Guhyam muktam Vashyo yatha margashire cha Masi tatha na cha Anyeshu cha Guhya muktam Guhya muktam Lord Vishnu says, the same activities that were earlier mentioned, taking a holy bath, doing japa, tapa and things, all these during the month of Margari can win me over in a way that doesn't happen during any other month. And he says, hereby a secret has been revealed to you, Brahma. So he has given us the supreme secret, saying that these holy activities are best practiced to win him over during the month of Margari. So this is, and he further says later in the same chapter that, in fact, he was the one who suggested to the Gopikas of Vrindavan to initially pursue this vrata. And to understand this, we have to go to the Bhagavata Mahapuranam, wherein it is said that the Gopikastris decided to perform something called the Katyayani Archana Vratam during this Hemanta Ritu, during the month of Margari, wherein they would get up early, chant, purify themselves by taking holy dip, and then they would chant a mantra which translates to, O Katyayani, O Mahamai, I pray for you to make the son of Nandagopa my husband. So this is the Gopis chant, and after they observe this vrata for the month of Margari, Krishna himself comes at the end, speaks to them directly and grants the Gopis the wish to unite with Krishna. And nowhere in this is it said that Krishna himself suggested it, but Mahavishnu later reveals in the Skanda Puranam that he was the one who suggested it to the Gopis in the first place. And finally, we come to the Tirupavai. It is said that the Vratam of the Gopis in Vrindavan is what inspired Andal Nachiyar to perform this Vratam that she describes in the Tirupavai. And here, I think she is very well aware of these lesser known things that I just mentioned, because she says in the very first Pasuram, Narayanane Namakke Parai Taruvan. Why does she have to say Narayanane Namakke? Which means only Narayana will reward only us with the fruits of this Margari Vratam. It means to say that Namakke means only us. She calls themselves an exclusive group because, like Lord Mahavishnu has said in the Skanda Puranam, the people who perform such holy acts during the month of Margari hold a special place in his heart, even among all his devotees. So Namakke symbolizes the select group of people who perform Vratam in Margari, and Narayanane means to say that it is not that he will send someone else or bestow us in a passive or indirect way. He himself comes and gives us everything that we need and gives us the fruits of this Margari Vratam, which is what is seen towards the end of the Tirupavai in the final few Pasurams. Andal directly converses with Krishna and asks for his blessings. In fact, in today's Pasuram, which is the 26th day, she asks Krishna himself for everything that they need to perform this Margari Vratam. So, Krishna is the one who suggests the Margari Vratam. He is the one who provides everything for the Margari Vratam. He is the purpose. He is the one who shows the way. And finally, Krishna is the very one who finally bestows the rewards as well. So the whole idea that the Margari Vratam is so special, especially how it's described in the Tirupavai, and how the month of Margari is special to Vaishnavites, is shown here. Coming parallelly to the Tiruvembavai and the Tirupalli Ezhuchi, these are texts that are parallels to the Tirupavai in the Shaivite tradition. Tirupavai and Tiruvembavai have a very similar format. Both of them, we'll see more about the similarities later. But Tiruvembavai essentially it has the same objective of coming together during this month of Margari and praying to the Lord Shiva. This Tiruvembavai and the Tirupalli Ezhuchi together have 30 pasurams, exactly equal to the number of verses in the Tirupavai. And the special glory of the Tiruvembavai, or the entirety of the Tiruvasakam text, which is where the Tiruvembavai is taken from, has a special credit that it was written by Manikavasaka Peruman, one of the four foremost Shaivite saints in the Tamil sect. And further, the special glory given to this the Manikavasakar's Tiruvasakam is that it was not scribed by anyone, but rather by Lord Nataraja himself. Manikavasakar is said to have lived in Chidambaram for a major part of his life, and during this time, an old man came and asked him to say the Tiruvasakam so that he can scribe it. And the very next day, the manuscripts of the Tiruvasakam were found in the Sannidhi of Nataraja, that too with the signature of the Lord, saying Azhagiya Tiruchitrambalam, which shows that the Lord himself came in a disguised form and scribed the Tiruvasakam for Manikavasakar. So, to show the symbolism, during the entirety of the month of Margari, the Tiruvembavai is chanted for the first till the day of the Arudra Darshanam. And after the Arudra Darshanam, the Tirupalli Ezhuchi is sung. And again, like I said, we can see almost clear similarities where 20 plus 10 and 30 pasurams are there in both Tiruvembavai and Tirupalli Ezhuchi together compared to the Tirupavai. In both of them, the last 10 pasurams are like a waking up of the Lord and asking him for benefits. There are 8 to 10 verses in each wherein the different other devotees, the Bhagavata Stris, are woken up and to go and pray to the Lord. In both of them, the consort or the wife of the Lord is appealed to separately. In the Tirupavai, Andal Nachiyar specially appeals to Nappinai Pirati, asking her to wake up the Lord and ask him to bless them. As a parallel, in Manikavasakar's Tiruvembavai, he appeals to Uma Devi, or goddess Parvati, to urge the Lord to bestow upon them fruits and to bless us herself as well. And in both of these, the Lord is only addressed directly towards the end, where he is woken up and asked for boons. So we see how much similarity we see in the texts of the Vaishnavite and Shaivite texts related to this month of Margari, which show us the Hari-Hara Abhedham to begin with. And to go further, we also see very stark similarities between the composers of these two texts. When it comes to Andal Nachiyar in Vaishnavism and Manikavasakar in Shaivism, both of them, apart from the fact that they wrote these texts that are celebrated during the month of Margari, they have other similarities also. For example, the Kovil that is referred to in Shaivism and Vaishnavism respectively happen to be Srirangam and Chidambaram, as I earlier said. Andal Nachiyar is one of the few Alvars who is known to have directly united with the Lord of Srirangam and attained Mukti. While most of the other Alvars have had their respective Mukti Sthalams, Andal Nachiyar is one of the Alvars who has directly gone and attained union with the king of Vaishnavism, Sri Ranganatha. And similarly, Manikavasakar has the rare blessing of becoming one with the Thillai Kuttan, the Chidambaranathan himself. And so we see that their respective muktis have happened in the capitals of their faiths respectively. Coming to the specialty of these two sthalas, the two capitals, Chidambaram and Srirangam, these have again been glorified extensively in literature. As an example, Tyagaraja Swami says in a very popular composition, Rangasai Pili Chitambara Yenuchum ra 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 da o ranga sai bhuloka vaikuntham itiyani bhuloka vaikuntham itiyani ranga sai. So here Tyagaraja Swami says, O Rangashai, O recliner of Srirangam, Bhuloka Vaikuntham Itiyani. Isn't this Bhuloka Vaikuntham? And he equates the Srirangam location with Vaikuntham itself on Bhuloka. And he says, this is itself Vaikuntham that I've come to. And he sings an entire Pancharatnam in Vaikuntham on Ranganatha. We're usually familiar with Tyagaraja Swami's Ghanaraga Pancharatnam. But here, just on Srirangam itself, he's sung a whole set of 5 kritis called the Sriranga Pancharatnam. And coming to Chidambaram, Gopalakshana Bharatiyar says very beautifully again in a very famous kriti, Kashiniyil idai kailai என்று Kashiniyil idai kailai என்று எல்லோரும் பேச கேட்டதே அன்றி பேணி பார்த்தருந்திடும் இதுதானோ தில்லை ஸ்தலம் இத்தனை நாளும் அறியேனே இதுதானோ தில்லை ஸ்தலம். Which means, காஷினியில் இதை கைலை என்று எல்லோரும் பேசக் கேட்டதே அன்றி பேணி பார்த்தறிந்திடும் இதுதானோ தில்லை ஸ்தலம். Which means, is this in fact the Thillai Chidambaram, which even people in Varanasi, which is known to be the most sacred of Mukti Sthalams, even Varanasi, which is such an important Shiva shrine, even people there say that காஷினியில் இதை கைலை என்று எல்லோரும் பேச. Everyone in Varanasi say that Chidambaram is in fact where Kailasha, the ultimate abode of Shiva Peruman, is. So that is how glorious Chidambaram is. Chidambaram is known to be Kailasha and Srirangam is known to be the Vaikuntha on earth. So which is why I guess Vaikuntha Ekadashi is most specially celebrated in Srirangam and parallelly Arudra Darshanam in Chidambaram. So we see that these two temples have a lot of similarity and a lot of intertwined connectedness. And another similarity is how both of these are not just commonly addressed as Kovil in the respective faith, but both of these are also Arangams. When we say, when we talk about Thillai Nataraja, we say that he's performing in his Chit Sabha. Sabha and Arangam have pretty much the same meaning. We say Pon Arangam for the Kanaka Sabha, which means that he's dancing in his stage or Arangam. Arangam translates to theatre or particular stage. And the dancer of Chidambaram very aptly dances in his stage or Arangam. But when it comes to Srirangam, that is also called Aranganathan, or he's called Aranganathan here. And it is called Arangam because Mahavishnu thinks that he also needs an Arangam to show his glory in Srirangam. And the deeper meaning is that Ranganatha or Mahavishnu, who is the sustainer or the protector of this illusory Bhuloka world, he's the one who runs this puppet show called our lives on Bhuloka. And so he's the puppet master who needs a stage, who while he is reclining, while he is sleeping in Srirangam, still needs an Arangam to stage his play. So both of these capitals are called Arangams and house their respective deities in Shaivism and Vaishnavism. So now we look at two verses on these very specific capitals of these two faiths. One of them is from Appar Peruman or Tirunavukkarasar Peruman's Thevaram, and the other is from Thondaradi Podiyalvar's. It's a Pasuram of Thondaradi Podiyalvar from the Divya Prabandham. Appar is again one of the four foremost bhaktas of Shiva as celebrated in the Tamil tradition of Shaivism, and parallelly Thondaradi Podiyalvar is one of the 12 Alvars who are the foremost of Vaishnavas or Vishnu Bhaktas. So both of these verses, that are their respective verses, are sung specifically on Tillai Nataraja and on Srirangam Ranganatha. And these are very popular verses that many of you might already be familiar with. But today I hope to bring out a new facet of it, where we see the similarity in the tone and the meaning of these two verses. And I'll explain more about the similarity of them once you hear their presentation. And I'm going to present them slightly differently from how they're usually sung, where I'm going to intertwine the lines of these verses, and you'll again see why. I'll explain once we hear the rendition. குனித்த புருவமும் கொவ்வை செவ்வாயிற் குமிற்றிரிப்பும் குனித்த புருவமும் கோவை செவ்வாயர் குமிற்றிரிப்பும் பணித்த சடையும் பவளம் போல் மேனியில் பால் வெண்ணீரும் குனித்த புருவமும் கோவை செவ்வாயிற் குமிற்றிரிப்பும் புருவமும் சிரிப்பும் சடையும் மேனியும் வெண்ணீரும் பவளம் போல் மேனி பவளம் போல் மேனி மலை போல் மேனி பவளவாய் கமல செங்கண் பச்சை மாமலை போல் மேனி பவளவாய் கமலச் செங்கண் அச்சுதாமர ஏரே அச்சுதாமரர் ஏரே ஆயர்த்தம் கொழுந்தே பச்சை மாமலை போல் மேனி பவளம் போல் மேனி மலை போல் மேனி பவளவாய் கமலச் செங்கண் அச்சுதாமரர் ஏரே ஆயர்த்தம் கொழுதேயனும் அச்சுதாயனும் இச்சுவை தவிர யான் போய் இந்திரலோகமாளும் அச்சுவை பெறினும் வேண்டேன் இச்சுவை தவிர யான் போய் இந்திரலோகமாளும் அச்சுவை பெறினும் வேண்டேன் அரங்கமானகருளானே அரங்கமானகருளானே இந்திரலோகமாடும் அச்சுவை பெறினும் வேண்டேன் அச்சுவை பெறினும் வேண்டேன் மனித பிறவியும் வேண்டுவதே இம்மாநிலத்தே எடுத்த பொற்பாதமும் காண பெற்றால் மனித பிறவியும் வேண்டுவதே இந்த மாநிலத்தே அச்சுவை பெறினும் வேண்டேன் அரங்கமானகருளானே இனித்த பொற்பாதமும் காணப்பெற்றால் மனித்த பிறவியும் வேண்டுவதே. இனித்தமுடைய எடுத்த பொற்பாதமும் காணப்பெற்றால் மனித்த பிறவியும் வேண்டுவதே. இந்த மாநிலத்தே So that was a presentation of the Tevaram and a Pasuram from the Divya Prabandham together. The reason I chose to intertwine them this way is because both of these are very popular verses, but we often fail to notice the similarity of the wordings, the message and the tone of the composers of both, despite them being of completely different faiths, so-called, and also on completely different deities as we see them. So, when Appar Peruman talks about Nataraja, he starts by describing his beautiful form. He says his beautiful eyebrows, curved eyebrows, his red lips, and his beautiful body are a sight to sore eyes. And similarly, Thondaradipudi Alvar starts by saying, Pachai Maamalai Pol Meni. Your body is like a green mountain. And then he goes on to describe his beauty as well, just like Appar did. And then, while the Thondaradipudi Alvar in Srirangam to Ranganatha says, if I can just see this form and just witness it, I wouldn't even want to come to Indira Loka, which is, as commentators have opined, it means Vaikuntham in this context. Alvar says, if I can just stare and gaze at your form, O Ranganatha, I would rather do this instead of coming to Vaikuntham. And almost as a continuation of that, Appar Peruman says, Manitta piravayum venduvade inda manilatte. If I get to see that Editta Purpadam, that Kunchita Padam, that curved lifted left foot of yours, O Nataraja, then I might as well come and be reborn on this earth just for that pleasure. So both of them talk about the beauty of the Lord, and in contrast to the usual addressal to the Lord, where we say, please liberate me from this cycle of birth and death, give me mukti, both of them say, give me birth, just so I can gaze at your divine form and revel in that ecstasy. So that is the beautiful similarity in the thought of both these Alvars, and the Alvar and the Nayanmar, especially in the capitals of their faiths in Srirangam and Chidambaram that we're looking at today. And it is not just these saints that we have that have been blessed to us on Bhuloka in the Kali Yuga that have given us this message. Nandi Bhagavan, who is probably the foremost of Shiva Bhaktas, we can say, because he is the mount, the bull on which Shiva Peruman himself ascends. And this Nandi worships Lord Vishnu in a Divya Desham called Nandipura Vinnakaram. It's near Kumbakonam, and it's glorified by the Alvars, wherein Nandi is seen worshipping Lord Maha Vishnu. And in contrast, it is very popularly known that Adisesha, who is the foremost of the Seshas or the Adiyars of Mahavishnu, who is the foremost of the Vishnu Bhaktas, worships Lord Shiva in Chidambaram in the form of Patanjali Muni. And there are many such instances, and Mahaperiyava in his Devathin Kural gives us many examples of such similarities between the two faiths. First, we look at a Kshetram-wise analysis of how we see Vishnu in different Shaivite shrines. For example, to begin with, there is a Mahavishnu situated in the very celebrated Kanchi Ekamreshwara temple in Kanchipuram. This is probably one of the most celebrated Shiva shrines, the Ekamranatha in Kanchipuram. But in his temple, there is a Divya Desham, one of the 108 exclusive Divya Deshams, which is sanctified by the Alvar saints. The Perumal is called Nila Tingal Tundattan, and he is located inside the Kanchi Ekamreshwara temple to show their Abhedham. And even more special is another Kshetram called Tirupparkadal, which Mahaperiyava tells us about. Tirupparkadal is geographically located in Vellore district in Tamil Nadu. The town is again included in the special list of 108 Divya Desams glorified by the Alvar saints, and it is included because it is considered to be the earthly Bhuloka equivalent of the Parkadal or Milky Ocean, which Mahavishnu reclines on in his divine abode. And so the Bhuloka equivalent is this place, which is why it's called Thiruparkadal. Interestingly, this Thiruparkadal, this town has a Shiva temple, which is also serenaded by the Shaivite saint Tirunavukarasar or Appar, who we just heard about before this. And even more special than these two shrines is that there is a temple in this town called Prasanna Venkateshwara Perumal Kovil. In this temple, the deity has a very unique form, which is a hybrid of Shiva and Vishnu. Normally in a Shiva temple, we'll see a linga as the central deity, and the linga is basically of the form, roughly, of a circular base with a mounded column rising from the base, which is a semi-abstract representation of Shivam. Here in this Prasanna Venkateshwara Perumal Kovil, there is the circular base called the Avudayar, but above that, instead of the mounded column, we see an idol of Venkateshwara Perumal who's standing on the circular base, replacing that column. So it is like half a lingam and half a representation of Mahavishnu in the form of Venkateshwara. So this is a very special place that shows us the Abhedham, or the indistinction between Shiva and Vishnu in Thiruparkadal. Coming to instances of Lord Shiva seen in Vaishnavism, we see this in terms of the literature, the sacred literature of the Alvars, who have given us 4,000 plus verses extolling Mahavishnu. Again, Mahapariva quotes many of these for us. Among the earliest Alvar saints were the three Alvars called the Mudal Alvargal, including Peyalvar, Bhudat Alvar, and Poigai Alvar. Peyalvar, in one of his pasurams, intersperses the characteristic features of both Shiva and Vishnu when he talks about Venkatachalapati in Venkatadri. Instead of describing him just as Vishnu, he intersperses the features of Shiva and Vishnu and concludes by saying, Thirumalai mel yendaikku iranduruvum ondrai isaindu. Atop Thirumalai, to my mind, it seems like both these forms have been fused together or intertwined, is how I see it. Similarly, Poigai Alvar says, Iruvar angattal thirivarenum oruvan angatta endrum ulan. Which means, though they may also wander as two different deities, one Lord is any day part of the other. Oruvan angatta endrum ulan. And the first word is very special, very beautiful to our discussion today, because he says, Iruvar angattal thirivarenum, which Iruvar angattal can be split as Iruvar angattal, which means two people by body. But it can also be resplit or split in a different way as Iru arangattal thirivarenum. Arangam means stage, as I explained earlier. Iru arangattal thirivar means though they may roam in different arangams, Sri Rangam and Chidambaram, though they may roam in different kshetras, Oruvan angatti endrumulan. One is part of the other any day. So we come back to the mention of the two arangams that are the capitals of these two faiths. And Mahapariva goes on to give many instances of how their activities and appearances and their gunas are, interchanged to show that indistinction. And I'll just quote one before proceeding further. Periva says, Vishnu's complexion, his appearance is dark. He's called Shama Krishna. And even when Kambar comes to request for Rama in the Kamba Ramayanam, he addresses Dashratha and says, Kariya semmal oruvanai tandidudi. Please give me your dark-hued son, is what Vishwamitra says to Dashratha. Seems very odd to say to a parent, but this is the most beautiful feature that all the saints have described for Mahavishnu. So Vishnu's complexion is dark and the black or dark color is usually the quality associated with it is tamoguna. Tamoguna is that quality of lethargy, destruction, etc. And on the other hand, Lord Shiva is bright pearly white, which is the color of Sattvaguna. But here again, to show their oneness, their unity, the dark-hued Mahavishnu does the job of sustaining the world which is an activity attributed to Sattva Guna and the color white. And contrastingly, white-hued Shiva performs destruction, which is normally attributed to Tamoguna and the color black. And even if we see the two Arangams that I was talking about, we see that harmony beautifully played out. Normally, Mahavishnu is the energetic sustainer because he's the protector. He's the one responsible for sthiti or sustenance. So he is very energetic, as we see in all the Puranas, while Shiva is most often seen in that still, peaceful, mendicant or yogi form. But in the Arangams, we see the opposite of this played out, where Mahavishnu, the energetic one, is calmly sleeping as Bhogindra Shai. Bhogindra Shayinam Kuru Kushaladayinam, sings Maharaja Swadhitirnad. So Mahavishnu is in Srirangam resting happily on the Bhogindra or Adisesha, the king of snakes, and on the contrast, the still peaceful Lord Shiva is ecstatically dancing in Chidambaram as Tillai Kootan, which Manikavasakar says Nattillai Chitrambalate Tiyadum Kootan in the Tirumembavai. So the contrast is very starkly seen in the two Arangams. So to bring out this union, this fusion of Mahavishnu and Shiva, next we're going to look into a composition set in Rupakatalam in the Ragam Shankarabharanam, where the episodes and the forms of these two deities of Shiva and Vishnu are compared and the similarities are brought out, and I'll explain more about the meaning of the song as we go along. யார்கரம் பரிந்தருளும் என யார்கரம் பரிந்தருளும் என தேடி புகழ் நாடி வந்தேன் யார்கரம் பரிந்தருளும் என தேடி புகழ் நாடி வந்தேன் ஹரிஹரன் எனும் திருவுருவின் அபேதம் கண்டறியாது நான் யார்கரம் பரிந்தருளும் என தேடி புகழ் நாடி வந்தேன் ஹரிஹரன் எனும் திருவுருவின் அபேதம் கண்டறியாது நான் யார்கரம் பரிந்தருளும் என தேடி வந்தேன் பார்க்கடல் அலை மேல் பள்ளி கொண்ட பத்மநாப பிரபோ பார்க்கடல் அலை மேல் பள்ளி கொண்ட பத்மநாப பிரபோ பார்க்கடல் அலை மேல் பள்ளி கொண்ட பத்மநாப பிரபோ சேத் சபேஷ மனம் kavar swarupa karunya sindho chitsabhesha manam kavar swarupa karunya sindho malai mahal nadana malai mahal nadana alai mahal nadana malai mahal nadana alai mahal nadana சகல உலகமளந்த நாராயணன் பதாம்புஜமதா சகல உலகமளந்த நாராயணன் பதாம்புஜமதா புவியான் காஷி விஸ்வேஸ்வரன் அளிக்கும் அபயமதாயார் கரம் பரிந்தருளும் என சகல புவனமளந்த நாராயணன் பதாம்புஜமதா புவியாள் காஷி விஸ்வேஸ்வரன் அளிக்கும் அபயமதா புவியாளும் காஷி விஸ்வேஸ்வரன் அளிக்கும் அபயமதா யார் கரம் பரிந்தருளும் என தேடி வந்து. So that is the Pallavi and the Anupallavi of the composition. I thought I'll explain the meaning till there before we proceed to the Charanam. The Pallavi starts by saying, Hari Yar Karam Parindarulum Yena Thedi Pugal Nadi Vanden. Unknowing who will grant me refuge or who will bless me, I came searching for both of them. Hari-Haran Yenum Thiruvuruvin Abhedham Kandariyadu. Without realizing the oneness of Hari and Hara or Shiva and Vishnu, I came wondering which one of them will come and give me refuge. And then the Anupallavi goes on to say, Parkadal Alaimel Pallikonda Padmanabha Prabho. Is it going to be that Padmanabha or the reclining Lord of the Milky Ocean who will give me refuge? Or will it be Chit Sabhesha, Manam Kavar Swarupa Karunya Sindho, the enchanting form of Chit Sabhesha, who is the ocean of mercy? While one reclines on the Milky Ocean, the other is an ocean of mercy. So I'm wondering who to go to. And then it says, Malai Mahal Nadana, is it the Lord of the daughter of the mountains? Or Alai Mahal Nadana, is it the daughter of the Milky Ocean, who is Mahalakshmi? So is it going to be the Lord of Parvati or Mahalakshmi? Then the Madhyamakala Sahityam goes to say, Sakala Bhuvanam Alanda Narayanan Padambhujamada. In the Vamana Avatara, Lord Sriman Narayana came as Vamana and took the Trivikrama Avatara to scale all three worlds. So is it that foot that scaled all three worlds going to be my refuge? Or Puviyalum Kashi Vishveshwaran Nalikum Abhayamada. Vishveshwara itself means Lord of the universe. So Puviyalum, is it going to be him who rules the entire universe, who is none other than Vishwanatha, or a form of Lord Shiva in Varanasi, who is going to give me refuge, is the meaning of the Madhyamakala Sahityam. And it's very apt, I think, for today, because Puviyalum Chit Sabheshan talks about Nataraja and Padmanabhan talks about Ranganatha. So it's very apt for our focus today. And the Charanam then goes on to explore this idea more. Gopalanai பாரிலோதித்ததில்லை நாதன் அடி பணிந்தாய். கோபாலனாய் பாரிலோதித்ததில்லை நாதன் அடி பணிந்தாய். புவியில் வானரனாய் ஜனித்து பரமபதம் அடைந்தாய். கோபாலனாய் பாரிலோதித்ததில்லை நாதன் அடி பணிந்தாய். புவியில் வானரனாய் ஜனித்து பரமபதம் அடைந்தாய். மோகினியாய் சூரர்களுக்கு முதோட்டி அமரவரமளித்தாய். சுந்தரேஷன் கொடு விஷம் பருகியும் ಅಮರನೃಣರ್ತಿಯ ಅಭಿಷೇಕ ಪ್ರಿಯ ಶಂಕರ மோகினியாய் சுரர்களுக்கு முதோட்டி அமரவரமணி தாய் சுந்தரேஷன் கொட்டு விஷம் பருகியும் அமரனுணர்த்திய அபிஷேக பிரிய சங்கரா ஆபரண பிரிய ஸ்ரீதரா अभिषेक प्रिय शंकराभरण प्रिय श्रीधरा अभिषेक प्रिय शंकराभरण प्रिय श्रीधरा श्रीधर प्रिय शंकरा शंकर प्रिय श्रीधरा श्रीधर प्रिय शंकर शंकर प्रिय श्रीधर मिथिलेशन तव पुदल विमण मुडीत रघुराम मिथिलेशन तव पुदल विमण मुडीत रघुराम ईश अनादि ಒಳಿಯಾಗಿ ಬಂದ ಸರ್ಪಹಾರ ಮಾಧವ ಪಾರ್ಥನ್ ಕಂಡ ವಿಶ್ವರೂಪಾವತಾರ ಮಾದೇವ உமைக்கு தாரக நாம திறன் விளக்கினாய் நான் யார் கரம் பரிந்தருளும் என தேடி வந்தேன். So here in the Charanam, it starts by saying, Gopalanai Paril Udittu Tillainathan Adipanindai. This is an idea that the great composer Gopalakshmi Bharati very often employs. He uses the mudra Balakrishna or Gopalakrishna either to mean himself or to mean Sri Krishna, and says that in some compositions he says Krishna as Narayana, when he incarnated as Krishna, was fondly going and worshipping the feet of Lord Nataraja. And in a different instance he also says Tillai Nataraja left Chidambaram and went all the way to Gokulam, Vrindavan, to see Krishna dancing on Kalinga. So these Mahans have truly realized that there is no hierarchy, superiority or inferiority, but they are one and the same as deities. So Gopalanai Paril Udit Tillainathan Adipanindai Puviyil Vanaranai Janittu Paramapadamadaindai. Lord Shiva incarnated, an incarnation of an amsham of Lord Shankara is what Hanuman is known to be. This Tyagaraja Swami says in Adamodigalade Ramaya, he calls Hanuman Shankaramshudai, or even in the Hanuman Chalisa by Tulisidasa, he says Shankara Suvana Kesari Nandana. So Hanuman is known to be an amsha of Lord Shankara, and by being born this way, Shiva has come to the Paramapada or the divine feet of Lord Narayana, who incarnated as Rama. Further, during the churning of the Milky Ocean, the Samudra Manthana, Mohiniyai Surargalukku Amudutti Amaravaramalithai. This is about Lord Narayana. By taking the form of Mohini, Lord Maha Vishnu distributed the nectar of immortality, the Amrita, so that the Devas can attain immortality. But as ironically as it is, Sundaresha, who is another form of Lord Shiva, took up not the Amrita that was being distributed, but the deadly poison, which is the Halahala Visham, and consumed that and still stayed on as Amara or immortal. So he showed that he is immortal with or without the Amrita. So again we see the interplay of Vishnu and Shiva here in this episode. Then the next line says, Abhisheka Priya Shankara. Lord Shiva is known to be Abhisheka Priya, which is why in most temples you will see the Linga Trimeni being anointed by a pot which keeps dripping water on Mahadeva or the Lingam, which shows that he is very fond of his ritual baths, and this is why he is called Abhisheka Priya. And contrastingly, Lord Mahavishnu is called Alankara Priya or Abharana Priya, because he loves dressing in his Pitambara with all his ornaments, while Lord Shiva is just, clad in tiger and elephant skin with very, smearing himself with vibhuti. Lord Mahavishnu, though we don't have many instances of him bathing, in the Puranas, he is very well anointed with all jewelry and he's called Abhisheka Priya or Abharana Priya. So, in the coming together of these two lines, we also have the Raga Mudra, which is another indication that these two deities are one and the same, because one word from the first line and the last word from the first line and the first word from the last line, Shankara and Abharana, come together to form the ragam name Shankara Abharanam. So Abhisheka Priya Shankara Abharana Priya Sridhara becomes Abhisheka Priya Shankara Abharana Priya Sridhara. And finally, the icing on the cake comes in the final line of the first half of the Charanam, which is said as Sridhara Priya Shankara, Shankara Priya Sridhara. Yes, you might respectively be fond of Abhisheka and Abharana, but what is most beloved to Mahavishnu or Sridhara is Shankara himself, and what is most beloved to Shankara or Shiva is Sridhara himself. Sridhara Priya Shankara, Shankara Priya Sridhara. So they have a mutual affection for each other that is surreal and beyond our human words to describe. And finally, we come to the Madhyamakala Sahityam of the Charanam. I'll explain a very, I won't go into a line by line explanation due to paucity of time, but I will explain a very unique feature of this Charanam, this Madhyamakala Sahityam. So the first line says, so the idea behind it is that the last two syllables of each of two avritams happen to be the two syllables Ra and Ma. So when we sing the entire thing together, the last two syllables of every alternate beat will be the word Rama. I'll demonstrate that and then I'll explain the significance of that. ಮಿಥಿಲೇಶಂತವ ಪುದಲ್ ವಿಮಣ ಮುಡಿತರ ಘುರಾಮ ಈಶ ಅನಾದಿ ಒಳಿಯಾಗಿ ವಂದ ಸರ್ಪಹಾರ ಮಾಧವ ಪಾರ್ಥನ್ ಕಂಡ ವಿಶ್ವರೂಪಾವತಾರ ಮಾದೇವ ಉಮೈಕ್ ತಾರಕ ನಾಮ ತಿರನ್ ವಿಳಕಿನ ನಾನ್ಯಾರ್ ಕರಂ ಪರಿಂದರುಳುಂ ಎನ. So the name Rama appears 3 times. First explicitly as Raghurama, then Sarpahara Madhava. So in the Hara plus Madhava, the Rama word appears, and in the third line, Vishwarupa Avatara Madeva. Again, Ramadeva gives the word Rama. And the final line explains why it has been done in this way. The final line says, Madeva Umaik Tarakanama Tiran Vilakkinai. In the Vishnu Sahasranamam, Lord Umadevi or Parvati asks Lord Shiva a question. She asks, Keno payena laghuna Vishnor nama sahasrakam patyate panditair nityam stotumichamiham prabho. Which means, what is the easy way for panditas who are so busy with their rituals and pujas to daily chant the 1,000 auspicious names of my brother Vishnu? And for that, Mahadeva says, Shri Rama 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 iti Rame Rame Manorame. Which means, the easiest way for people to chant the 1,000 names is by simply chanting the Ramanama 3 times. And that is why the 3 times there is a mention of the Ramanama in this Madhyamakala Sahityam. First explicitly and then twice as an injunction of 2 lines. But it always appears in the last beat to give that meaning of Rama. So this is the significance of the word Rama, and we'll go further a little bit into why this Ramanama is so important when we're discussing Hari-Hara Abhedham. And to do so, we should perhaps go to we have to go to probably one of the most significant Rama Bhaktas, or as we know, one of the most prominent Rama Bhaktas that we know of in the recent past, which is none other than one of the members, the most celebrated member perhaps of the Carnatic music trinity, which is Tyagaraja Swami. The beauty is shown even in his name, wherein Tyagaraja is the name of the manifestation of Lord Shiva in Tiruvarur, which is where Tyagaraja Swami, the composer, was born. And the composer was named after the deity of the town, which was a form of Lord Shiva. And Tyagaraja Swami, the composer, went on to become a Rama Bhakta, who we assume Rama to be an incarnation of Vishnu. So we see the coming together there. And we have to look into the compositions of Tyagaraja Swami to understand the Mahima of this Ramanama. So it is said that I'll sing the charanam of one of his compositions that extols the glory of the Ramanama, and then we'll see how it fits into this context of Hari-Hara Abhedham. And I think it's also very appropriate for this composition. It is set in the ragam Deva Amrita Varshini, and we just talked about how in the episode of the Amrita Mantanam for the Devas, Shiva and Vishnu came together to accomplish this task, and so Deva Amrita Varshini seems to be a very aptly chosen ragam for this composition that extols the unity of Shiva and Vishnu, and we'll see how Tyagaraja Swami does that here. Shivudano Madhavudano Shivudano Madhavudano Shivudano Madhavudano Shivudano Madhavudano Shivudano Madhavudano Kamala Bhavudano Kamala Bhavudano Kamala Bhavudano Parabrahmayamano Yavarani Nirnayinchirira Yavarani Nirnayinchirira Naravarolavaranim Nirnayin Chiriram Shivamantramunakum Majivamu Shivamantramunakum Majivamu Madhavamantramunakum Rajivamu Madhavamantramunakum Rajivamu Ee Vivaramu తెలిసిన ఘనులకు వివరము తెలిసిన ఘనులకు వివరము తెలిసిన ఘనులకు మ్రోకేద వితరణ గుణ త్యాగరాజ వినూత ఆయవరణి నిర్ణయించిరిరా నిన్నెట్లరా నరవరోల నీ నిర్ణయించిర్రిరా. So in this very beautiful composition, Tyagaraja Swami tells us a very important matter about the union of Shiva and Vishnu and how it relates to Rama. He says, Shiva mantra munaku ma jeevamu. The Shiva Panchakshara mantra is revered as the most sacred of all mantras that revere Lord Shiva. The Shiva Panchaksharam consists of the syllables Namo as the first two, and then the words Shivaya as the next three, which totals 5 syllables. So Namaha plus the Shiva Nama become the Panchakshara mantra. Shiva literally means the one who brings auspiciousness, or who is the embodiment of welfare and prosperity. So I bow down to the one who blesses us with auspiciousness is what the mantra means. But if we take out the syllable Ma, which Tyagaraja Swami says is the jiva of the mantra becomes Na Shivaya. Na Shivaya means the one who is not auspicious. So the entirely contrast, the conflicting meaning arises if we take out the jiva of the mantra, which is the essential syllable. Similarly, if we come to Mahavishnu, there is the Ashtakshara Mahamantra that is the most sacred for Mahavishnu. It is said that the Ashtaksharam is the Pranava mantra being the first syllable, Namo being the next two, and Narayanaya are the last 5 syllables. So 5 plus 2 plus 1 are the 8 syllables of the Ashtakshara Mahamantram. Narayana again has many meanings. There have been books written etymologically deriving hundreds of meanings for that one word. But for today's purpose, we'll look into one of these meanings. Nara can mean humans or people on earth, and Ayana means path. He who shows the ultimate path, the Marga Shirsham, for all the people on earth is Narayana. From this, if we take out the essential syllable, the Jiva, which Tyagaraja Swami says is Ra, it becomes Na Ayanaya, which means the one who shows no path. Na means no, and Ayanaya means the one who shows the path. So the opposite meaning of the mantram is gotten if we take out the syllable Ra. So the Ra is the jiva of the Ashtaksharam, and Ma is the jiva of the Panchaksharam of Shiva. So bringing together these two syllables, we get Rama, which is a confluence of Shiva and Vishnu. So though we commonly think of Rama to be an incarnation, an avatara of Mahavishnu, he is in fact an embodiment of the confluence of Lord Shiva and Vishnu, and that is symbolically shown in Ramachandra Murthy's name itself, which is a combination of the jiva of their respective Mahamantras. This is what Tyagaraja Swami says. He says, "E viviramu telisina ganulaku brokkeda vitarana guna Tyagaraja vinuta." Whoever are the great people who know this secret, Tyagaraja Swami reveres them. And so Tyagaraja Swami tells us so much about the Rama Bhakti and how much the Ramanama is seen as the confluence of Shiva and Vishnu. And this is generally seen in many of his works, because Tyagaraja Swami didn't exclusively sing just about Mahavishnu or Sri Rama. He has written an entire Kovur Pancharatnam about Lord Shiva. He has sung extensively about the Sundareshwar Perumal and Kovur. He's written in Lalgudi as well. He's written extensively about Shiva. Shiva Shiva Shivayana Radha is another composition of Tyagaraja Swami, who we see clearly is a bhakta of Shiva as well as Vishnu, or Rama, who is a confluence of them both. And even this composition, he keeps addressing Vishnu as Madhava. Madhava means the consort of Ma or Mahalakshmi, but the reason I believe Tyagaraja Swami has used the word Madhava for Vishnu is because it starts with Ma, which is the Jiva Aksharam of Panchakshara Mahamantram, as we just saw. So this Abhedham he has demonstrated in many compositions. I think just before I started today's presentation, another very wonderful singer was singing Haridasulu in Yamuna Kalyani, where he describes the glory of Hari Bhaktas, or how they sing and praise Lord Hari. And in another song in Begada, Tyagaraja Swami says, Hari Bhaktuni Charitramu Vinave Manasa, Sita Ramuni Bhaktuni Charitramu Vinave Manasa. O heart, O mind, please do listen to me as I list the qualities of true Hari Bhaktas. And after saying this, he goes on to list many qualities, 11 to 12 qualities. But almost as a centerpiece, crowning jewel to all these qualities, he gives us the sixth quality, wherein he says, Bhava Vibhavamu Nijamani Enchagaradu. Don't think that this worldly existence is the ultimate truth. Adhika Kamari, even furthermore, Shiva Madhava Bhedamu Jayagaradu. Again, he says Madhava, like I just explained why he says Madhava when he talks about the Abhedham. He says Shiva Madhava Bhedamu Jayagaradu, which means it doesn't do to differentiate between Shiva and Madhava. Since we talked about Gopalakshana Bharati earlier, he also has said in composition in Suruti, Hari-Hara Bhedam Kadand. We need to get past this distinction of Hari and Hara if we have to become true Bhaktas. And so Tyagaraja Swami in multiple compositions, in another in Kedara Gaula, he says, Tulasi Bilva Mallikadi Jalaja Sumamula Pujala Kaikonave. Tulasi is very sacred to Vishnu or Sri Krishna, and Bilva, the Bilva leaf, is very sacred to Paramashiva. He says, I will do puja with both, symbolically showing that he is a bhakta of both Shiva and Vishnu, and he sees no distinction between them. In another composition, in Sri Ragam, Nama Kusuma Mulache Pujinche, he says, Nada Swaramane Vara Navaratnapu Vedikapai. Using Nada, the sacred primordial sound, and the Sapta Swara to form the gem-studded altar for worship. Manasa Kanaka Pithamuna Chelaga Jesikoni. Firmly I will install my mind as the golden throne on which to seat my deity. After doing all this, after creating a gem-studded altar with a golden throne using my music and my mind, Vara Shiva Rama Nama Kusumamulache Pujinche. Using the great Shiva and Rama Namas as the flowers, Pujinche Narajanmame Janmam Manasa. Only a Janma who does this, worships both of them as equals, has truly attained the purpose of this human birth. And this we see in lot of Rama Bhaktas, not just Tyagaraja Swami. We see it very clearly here in his musical works. But most Rama Bhaktas we see having realized this indifference between Hari and Hara. For example, when it comes to the Valmiki Ramayanam, in fact, Tyagaraja Swami himself is considered an avatara or an incarnation of Valmiki Bhagavan, who wrote the source Adi Kavyam, which is the Valmiki Ramayanam. And it is said that he wasn't fulfilled, just writing the Valmiki Ramayanam. So he came as Tyagaraja Swami to sing the praises of Rama as music. But in the Valmiki Ramayanam, there are multiple instances where Ramachandra Murthy is described as an incarnation of Vishnu, as well as as a metaphor to Lord Shiva. I'll just quote a few verses from a particular episode of the Karadushana Yuddham in the Valmiki Ramayanam, which appears in the Aranyakanda. In the Aranyakanda, Valmiki Maharshi says, after completing his bath, Ramachandra Murthy shone alongside Sita and Lakshmana and made it look as though it was Lord Rudra shining after his ritual Abhisheka along with Parvati and Nandi. So the union is shown there as well, the equality between them. Next, coming to the Karadushana Yuddham, he says that Rama, when he saw the demons approaching, he looked when he picked up his Kodanda, and he looked as though he was the ferocious wielder of Pinaka. Pinaka being Lord Shiva's bow. He says that Rama's fierce form upon seeing the demons, he lifted the bow and looked like the Pinaka Pani or Lord Shiva. Further, his anger was so great of Ramachandra Murthy that he looked like Lord Shiva ready to destroy the sacrifice of Daksha. Again, very popular story where Daksha is the father of Dakshayani, who is married to Lord Shiva, and Daksha Prajapati disrespects Shiva and Dakshayani, where Dakshayani finally immolates herself, and this infuriates Lord Shiva, and he sends his Bhutaganas to destroy the Daksha Yajna. So Rama's anger upon seeing Karadushana and his retinue of demons was so great that he looked like Shiva ready to destroy the sacrifice of Daksha. Further, surrounded by the terrible demons, Rama appeared like Lord Shiva at dusk with hosts of his retinues around him. This is all translations of the Valmiki Ramayana. And finally, the demons who go to attack Rama come back to Khara all afraid because this man is too powerful for them. And so Dushana pacifies all of them and asks them to charge again. He says, pacifying them, Valmiki Bhagavan says, Dushana regathered them again and again and ran towards Rama like an angry Yama rushing towards Rudra. This is a reference to the Markandeya Puranam, wherein Markandeya's time on earth is up. So Yama comes to take him to Yamaloka, but he goes towards the Shivalinga and hugs it. So Yama comes charging towards the Shivalinga. This is how Dushana looked when he charged towards Rama, says Valmiki. And finally, at the climax of this episode, Khara was burnt by the blaze of Rama's arrows, just as Yama was knocked down by the third eye of Shiva in Shvetaranya. This is what, again, from the Valmiki Ramayana. So again, the Rama and Shiva Abhedham is seen. And this is not just in the Valmiki Ramayana. In the Tamil version of the Ramayana, which was written by Kambar, he also talks about this whole episode. And Kanchi Mahapariva quotes a saying of Kambar, wherein he says, Aran Adihan, Ulakaland Ari Adihan, Yendruraikum Arivillorku, Paragati Sendradaivad Ariya Parisu. Which means to say, for those fools who say that Hara is greater or Hari is greater, the ultimate refuge of liberation or moksha is a far-fetched reward. So this is the state of these Mahans who have realized that Shiva and Vishnu are like two manifestations of the Parabrahman. So there is no reason to look at these two as different forms, or even worse, to create rivalry and contests between the respective bhaktas of these faiths, because ultimately we are to realize that they are nothing but one and the same and to be worshipped in unison by us. As Kalidasa says in the beginning of Raghuvamsha, Vagartha viva sampraktau Vagartha pratipattaye Jagataf pitarau vande Parvati parameshwarau Jagataf pitarau vande Parvatipa rameshwarau. Which is the implicit meaning, without going into the translation, is that just as inseparable as speech and meaning are, that is how inseparable Shiva and Parvati are, and that is how inseparable Parvatipa or Shiva and Rameshwara or Vishnu are. So this is clearly shown by the Nama Rama, as we just saw, and by many other compositions of Tyagaraja Swami. And praying that Rama Bhakti, which is like an empire, is blessed upon all of us by that Supreme, to worship Shiva and Vishnu as one form, as one divine entity. That blessing, hoping that all of us will be blessed with that privilege. I hope that we have delineated a little bit of what Hari-Hara Abhedham is. And so I would like to sing another composition of Tyagaraja Swami, where he talks about the experience of Rama Bhakti and bows to everyone who is a Rama Bhakta. And I will sing the composition and then we'll look at the meaning of what he tries to say in this composition. This song is in Ragam Shuddha Bangala. And the song was specially requested by Ranga sir last time I performed for Rudra Paaraayanam. So I'm very glad to be able to present it in today's presentation as a tribute to Ramachandra Murthy. Rama Bhakti Samrajam, 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 ఏ మానవులే కబేనో మనసారామ భక్తి సామ్రాజ్యం ఏ మానవులే కబేనో మనసారామ భక్తి సామ్రాజ్యం ఆ మానవుల సందర్శనం ఆ మానవుల సందర్శనం ఆ మానవుల సందర్శనం అత్యంత బ్రహ్మానందమే అత్యంత బ్రహ్మానందమే ఆ మానవుల సందర్శనం అత్యంత అత్యంత బ్రహ్మానందమే ఆ మానవుల సందర్శనం అత్యంత బ్రహ్మానందమే రామ భక్తి సామ్రాజ్యం ఏ మానవుల కబేనో మనసారామ భక్తి సామ్రాజ్యం ఇలాగని వివరింపలేను సామ్రాజ్యం ఇలాగని వివరింపలేను రామ భక్తి సామ్రాజ్యం ఇలాగని వివరింపలేను చాలా స్వానుభవ వేద్యమే ఇలాగని వివరింపలేను చాలా స్వానుభవ వేద్యమే లీలా సృష్టియే జగత్రయమనే లీలా సృష్టి జగత్రయమనే లీలా సృష్టి జగత్రయమనే కోలాహల త్యాగరాజనుతుడే కోలాహల త్యాగరాజనుతుడే రామ భక్తి సామ్రాజ్యం ఏ మానవుల కబేనో మనసారామ భక్తి సామ్రాజ్యం సామ్రాజ్యం This composition, Tyagaraja Swami talks about the bhakti towards the devotees of Rama. Being devoted to Rama is one thing, but being devoted to the devotees of Rama itself is a big boon. He says, Rama Bhakti Samrajyam. The people who are the bhakti of Rama itself is like an empire, and the people who inhabit this empire, the Rama Bhaktas, Amanavula Sandarshanamu Atyanta Brahmanandame. Seeing the Lord, the Rama itself, the Supreme Being, Parabrahman in person, is usually described as Brahmanandam. But here he says, just seeing the devotees of Rama, the true devotees, itself is a Brahmanandam. And I think that Brahmanandam came out in, like I said, the singer who sang before me, who sang Haridasulu. Haridasulu Vedale. That composition entirely talks about the ecstasy of witnessing the sight of Haridasas or Haribhaktas. And he says, Ilagani vivarimpalenu chala swanubhava vedyame. Just as seeing the divine, the Parabrahmam, is an inexplicable experience that cannot be put into words and has to be experienced by one personally, similarly, seeing through Rama Bhaktas is an experience that has to be self-experienced and cannot be explained in words. And such is the nature of Rama Bhakti Samrajyam. And with that, paying my humblest obeisance to Tyagaraja Swami and Ramachandra Murthy, I'd like to thank all of you for joining me today in exploring Hari-Hara Abhedham, and how we also saw how that came together and merged into Rama Bhakti, as we saw, and how Rama is an embodiment of Shiva and Vishnu coming together. And today I think is a very apt day, not just because it is towards the climax of this auspicious month of Margari, which is special to both Hari and Hara, but also because today is the day of Pradosham, which is very important to Lord Shiva, and also because today happens to be, as my grandmother just told me, the day of Aradhana of Mahaperiyava. So the fact that we quoted so much of his divine teachings in this beautiful exploration that he has extensively discussed, I think is a bhagyam of mine. And thank you to Akhanda Rudra Paaraayanam and Ranga sir and all the organizers for having me over and giving me this opportunity once again. And before I conclude, I'd like to, since we started with the Tirupavai, I'd like to end with the Tiruvembavai, starting with Vaishnavism and ending with a Shaivite tradition. Because the very first line of the Tirupavai that I sang said, Margari Tingal Madiniraitha Nannal. And today, in the last verse from the Tiruvembavai I'll sing, the word Margari will appear in the very last line. So I think it's a very nice way to round things off. So once again, thank you for the opportunity, and paying my obeisance to Rama, Shiva, Vishnu and all the Bhaktas, because like I said, the service to Shivan Adiyargal and the service to Bhagavatas or the devotees of Mahavishnu are itself considered a big service in both Shaivism and Vaishnavism. So mentioning that final link for today, I would like to conclude today's presentation with a verse, the final verse of Manikavasagar's Tiruvembavai. Potriyaruluga nin adiyam padamalar. Potriyaruluga nin adiyam padamalar. Potriyaruluga நின் அந்தமாம் செந்தளிர்கள் போற்றியருளுக நின் ஆதியாம் பாதமலர் அந்தமாம் செந்தளிர்கள் போற்றி போற்றி எல்லா உயிர்க்கும் தோற்றமாம் பொற்பாதம் போற்றி எல்லா உயிர்க்கும் போகமாம் பூங்கடல்கள் எல்லா உயிர்க்கும் தோற்றமாம் பொற்பாதம் எல்லா உயிர்க்கும் போகமாம் பூங்கடல்கள் போற்றி போற்றி எல்லா உயிர்க்கும் ஈராம் இணையடிகள் போற்றி மானான் முகனும் காணாத புண்டரீகம் போற்றி மால் நான் முகனும் காணாத புண்டரீகம் போற்றி யாமுய்ய ஆட்கொண்டருளும் பொன்மலர்கள் போற்றியாமுய்ய ஆட்கொண்டருளும் பொன்மலர்கள் போற்றியாம் மார்கழி நீராடேலோர் மார்கழி நீராடேலோர் மார்கழி நீராடேலோர் எம்பாவாய் போற்றியாம் மார்கழி நீராடேலோர் Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Thank you once again for the wonderful opportunity, and I hand it back over to the organizers.
This is so beautiful, Abhishek. Always I feel the energy of Hanuman when you render your soulful presentation. I always feel that energy, passion and love. Do you know, yesterday we have read about, we are reading Satyasai Vahinis written by himself, and Rama Katha Rasavahini. That is what we are reading.
Okay.
And yesterday the topic is birth of Rama and all the sons, how they have birth, and what is the why they are only Rama Lakshmana are close, something. So that was the chapter going on, and it was supreme bliss when we are reading that. And today morning in the Sandeha Nivarini, which again written by him,
Okay.
he was saying about the inner significance of Ramayana, which is happening in each one of our hearts.
Right.
What is the characteristics and what it represents in our sense. That is the thing. And now you are saying about the Rama. It's like Rama is perfect in
All
the space
perfectly.
today. Especially,
Right. I know.
it's like we can't really express in the words what we are feeling.
Definitely. Chala Swanubhava Vedyame, as Tyagaraja Swami said.
Yes. And before that, today we have the Vagyakaras. All Vagyakaras, when they come together and talk, how it appears. That is a thought of one great lady, Kamala Devi Garu. She is an elder lady.
Okay.
And that is happening from the morning. It is like Rama is coming. I'm there.
Right.
So,
Wonderful.
So, it's like wonderful to have your presentation of straight from your heart today. Thank you so much. Vishwarupa Sai Consciousness is so grateful and so blissful to have you with us. Thank you.
Pleasure is all mine. Thank you for the opportunity again.